Hey guys! Well, while Walter is going absolutely postal because he thinks someone stole his cereal, I really want to introduce you to the new gun effect series from RodyPolis. The gun effect series contains 6 high-quality action-packed collections for muzzle flashes, bullet hits, gun sound effects, bullet shell casings, bullet hole textures, and bullet hit sound effects. And if that's not exciting enough for you, 3 of those collections are absolutely free. So in this video, I want to show you how you can get your hands on the new gun effect series, what's included, and how you can use it to create all sorts of mayhem. Before we get into the tutorial, I want to quickly take you through the new gun effects collections, but most importantly, I want to show you where you can get your free stuff. Simply pop open your favorite browser and go to www.actionvfx.com. This is the official Action VFX website from RodyPolis, and if you scroll down a little bit, you can browse through all of their collections. For this video, the ones we're interested in are the gun effects series. However, before we click on gun effects, let's just scroll down a little bit more, and this is likely where you want to go first. There's a tab here for free VFX, so let's jump into that. And this is where you can download a whole bunch of high quality free elements. So the first 3 collections are from the gun effects series, so we have the bullet hit sound effects, bullet hole textures, and the free shell casings. And the other 3 have been on the website for a little bit, but I encourage you to download them anyways. They're free, why wouldn't you? So there's dust waves, lens dirt overlays, and smoke plumes. Let's first jump into the bullet shells collection, and this collection contains 9 loopable bullet shell casings that you can use to make your gun effects look more realistic. You can click on these little thumbnails and you get a little sample video that you can check out. So that's the element that you can download. And a little bit of information, so it's 30 frames per second at full 1080p in 10-bit ProRes, so that's actually a pretty high quality file, and it's free, so let's click out of this. And you can either add the elements to your cart individually, obviously they all cost $0, so I hope that you can afford that, or you can just go up here, go download collection and say yes in HD for $0, click that, and it adds the element to your cart. Oh, but we don't want to check out yet. We want to get all the other free stuff. So let's go back and let's jump into the bullet hole textures. This collection contains almost 150 bullet hole textures for all sorts of materials and surfaces. So again, you can either check out the preview or you can just go download collection and add that to your cart as well. Let's go back and go to the bullet hit sound effects. And this collection, as the name suggests, contains bullet impact sounds, 36 of them to be precise. So again, let's go download collection and add that into our cart. And obviously you can download dust waves, lens dirt, smoke plumes exactly the same way. I won't take you through that. But one thing I recommend you do, come over into products, go into the explosions collection. And if you have not yet done that, you can actually download one of the high quality explosions for free. In Large Explosion 1, there's a free 2K version, so you go add to cart and you select the 2K version, which costs you nothing at all. So let's add that into our cart as well, because that is absolutely amazing and you definitely want to grab that if you haven't done so already. And now with 4 elements in your cart, let's jump into the cart, go to checkout, and here is our order summary. 3 collections and an explosion element, absolutely free. All you have to do is obviously create a new account, so you have to enter your details, your email address and your password. So let's do that. Go continue to checkout. And yes, everything looks okay, say complete order. And here's your new account. On the left hand side you have all of your downloads in tabs, so you can just click through these and download all of the files. And now, well, this is just half of the gun effects series. Before we move on to the tutorial, let me take you through the other 3 collections. Let's come back up into products. On the left side under the categories, let's click on gun effects. And these are all of the collections from the gun effects series. It's actually 7 now, they've already added another one. But the ones I want to show you is, for one, the Muzzle Flashes, so let's click into that. Now this collection is not free, it costs $99 if you want to purchase it, and you get about 60 muzzle flash elements. The elements included is a whole bunch of single shot pistol flashes, as well as a whole bunch of really high quality automatic fire. Let's check out this clip for the AR-15 at an angle. Looks pretty cool. So in this collection you do get a whole bunch of different muzzle flashes for all sorts of shootout situations. Let's go back and let's check out the bullet hits. You can purchase the 4K version of this collection for $199 or in 2K for $150. And the collection contains a very large number of bullet impacts into concrete and into dust. You have impact elements for walls, for example this one here. And you have separate elements for ground impacts. You can very easily composite these bullet hits into your shot to add a whole lot of destruction into your scene. Let's go back and let's finally check out the gun sound effects collection. Again, it's a paid collection and it costs you $99. What you get is over 100 gunshot sound effects, and these ones are both single and automatic fire, and you get almost 200 gun Foley sounds. Foley sounds are really important because by adding these types of sound effects of handling the guns or cocking them or ejecting the shells, it'll add a whole bunch of realism into your scene. It's time to jump into the tutorial, but very quickly one more note. RodyPolis is running a Black Friday sale starting November 25th, and a whole bunch of items are going to be heavily discounted, so if you are considering purchasing any of these collections, do check out the Black Friday sale coming up pretty soon. If not, do get all of the free elements anyways, they're free, why would you not want them? Anyways, now it's time to jump into the tutorial and create some mayhem. Here we are in Adobe After Effects, and this time I'm going to start out completely blank. I have a clip here in my project called No Cereal for Walter, and as always, if you do want to follow along, you can find a download link to this clip in the description of the video. Let's grab this clip and drop it on the new composition icon to create a new composition. The clip itself you've seen before, it's from the intro, and it's a shot of Walter going bananas cause someone stole his cereal or something. Let's spice up this shot by compositing some of the cool elements from the Gun Effects series into this composition. In my project I have a few selected elements from Gun Effects, and yes, I do have all 6 collections. I've got the paid and the free ones. So I've got muzzle flashes, gun sounds, bullet shells, bullet hole textures, bullet hits and bullet hit sound effects. The very first thing I usually like to add are muzzle flashes, so let's expand that. I've got a number of assorted muzzle flashes here. The one we are going to use are the Uzi ones. I've got one Uzi front and an Uzi angled. So let's go to the beginning where Walter starts shooting, probably about here. And you can see that Walter is kind of swinging the gun around. So there it's kind of straight onto the camera, and then it's a bit more angled and almost side on. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start out with the Uzi front muzzle flash here, and I'm going to transition over into the angled one. So let's go back to the beginning where Walter starts shooting, probably about here. Let's grab the Uzi front and let's drop that into our composition at the very top at the right time. And there's the element. Looks pretty cool. It's fully automatic fire, so you don't have to constantly repeat a single muzzle flash element over and over. Let's go to the beginning and let's scale this element down a little bit, and let's just place it over Walter's gun. Now obviously Walter's kind of moving his gun, so I do want to animate the position of this element. So let's go to the beginning, press P to reveal the position, enable the stopwatch icon on this layer. And let's go forward a little bit to about here. Let's drag this over a little bit so the element moves along with Walter's gun. I think it actually moves a little bit too far. Let's pull this in just a little bit more. And let's trim the end of this layer, because right about here I think is where I want to replace the muzzle flash with the angled version of it. Let's give Walter just a short break from shooting and then insert the Uzi angled stock footage element. So let's grab that clip and drop it into our composition. Again, it's a pretty cool looking element. Let's go to the beginning and scale this down and position it at the tip of the gun. And again, Walter is moving the hand, so we're going to have to animate the position of this element. So let's go to the beginning of the layer, reveal the position property and enable the stopwatch icon. And let's just skim through and reposition our muzzle flash as needed. I know I'm not doing the most accurate job, but for this tutorial I don't want to overkill it. Right about here is where Walter stops shooting, so let's trim down the layer so Walter actually stops firing. Let's rewind and check this out. And that actually looks pretty cool. Let's collapse all of our layers, and 2 things I usually like to do with my muzzle flashes is A, I like to desaturate them a bit, especially in this particular shot where there is a lot of light in the scene. The muzzle flash would probably not be visible quite so prominently. And then I also like to add a glow. Go back a little bit and let's select our Uzi front muzzle flash element and let's apply a hue and saturation effect. Let's bring down the saturation a little bit, not too much, just drain a little bit out of it, and let's apply a glow effect. And the glow effect I want is under stylized glow. Let's apply that to the front layer. And let's bring down the glow threshold and pump up the radius to just create a whole bunch of glow around this muzzle flash element. And as I've covered in many of my tutorials, let's return to the project very quickly and make sure that our project is set to 32 bits per channel so the glow is nice and visible. Return to the effects controls and let's pump up the radius a little bit more so that we'll have quite a large glow being cast by the muzzle flash. Actually, I'm finding this a little bit too saturated now again, so let's drain a little bit more color out of this. I think that looks a bit better. And what I might also do is I might lower the opacity just a little bit of this element, just so it's not quite so strongly visible. It's a little bit more faded. And now I'm just going to go the cheap route and essentially just going to collapse those two effects. Select both of them, copy them with Ctrl C and paste them onto my angle fire with Ctrl V. And again, let's lower the opacity just a little bit of this element, maybe to about 80%. And let's rewind and play this back. Cool, that's not looking too bad. Now, if I was going all out, I would probably add another layer for lighting that lights everything around Walter, because if he was shooting a real gun, there would be quite a bright flash at the front of the gun, and so Walter himself might be casting a shadow onto the door behind him, there might be light on the ceiling, and certain areas might be in shadow as it flashes, but maybe that's a topic for another tutorial. Let's instead move on to adding the empty shells flying out of the gun as Walter's going berserk. Let's select all of our layers, press U twice to collapse them all, and let's return to our project. In my gun effects folder, I also have bullet shells, and these ones are the free bullet shell elements that you can get from the actionvfx.com website. And let's simply drag one of these elements down into our composition and place it at our current time indicator. And if you scrub through, that's the actual shell element. That actually looks pretty cool. So what we want to do is we essentially want to have many shells being ejected from the side of Walter's gun. To achieve this, you have two options. Obviously, it's automatic fire. Walter's going pretty crazy, so there would be a lot of shells being ejected from the side of his gun. You could either add individual shell elements and animate them to fly out of the gun for every single shot fired, or you can set up a particle system that emits particles that are textured with this bullet shell casing from the side of the gun automatically. Personally, for any scene that contains more than maybe a handful of gunshots, I would always set up a particle system, but for the sake of keeping this tutorial short, let's just go the manual way. If you want me to create more tutorials for gun effects, like for creating automatic shells being ejected and for getting better lighting for the gun effects, do leave me some comments down below and I will make sure that I get around to doing those. For now, let's just add a few shell casings being ejected from the gun manually, and then you can have fun either setting up the particle system or going through the rest of the shot and adding all of the other shells. Let's go back to where Walter is firing the first gunshot, which is right about here. Let's move forward one frame. This is probably where we should see the shell being ejected. So let's drag the shell layer forward. So let's scale the shell casing down to match the size of the gun. That looks about right. And let's reveal the position property and set a keyframe. And what I'm going to do is, obviously I want the shell to be ejected and kind of fall down. So I'm going to go forward by about a second maybe and position the shell down here at the bottom. And I'm now going to use the Bezier handles on this motion path to essentially transform and bend the path to be a bit of a curve as if it was being ejected from the gun. If you can't see this motion path, and I get this question a lot, simply come up into Edit, Preferences, Display, and at the top there should be options for whether to display motion path. A lot of people have it disabled so they will not see this motion path. Make sure you either set this to all, no more than 5 keyframes, or I usually have it to no more than a certain amount of time, so more than 15 seconds. And then you should be able to see the motion path whenever you have a layer selected that has the keyframes enabled for its position property. So let's rewind and just play this back. And there you go, a single shell being ejected. I think it's a little bit slow actually, but maybe tweak this a little bit. So that's shell number 1. The next thing, the shell is a little bit too dark, I think. For this amount of lighting that we have in the scene, the shell is a bit too dark. So let's select the shell and apply a curves effect. Let me zoom back in so we can see this a little bit better. And let's just bring up the brightness of the shell a fair bit and maybe a little bit more contrast into it. Maybe that's gotten just a little bit too bright. Maybe I'll just darken it just a little bit. Yep, that looks about right. And next, obviously being ejected with quite a bit of velocity from the side of the gun, we'd want some motion blur on it. So let's enable motion blur on the layer and on the composition. So we have some motion blur on the shell. Let's zoom out and play this clip back. Cool, that's not too bad. Now the movement looks a bit odd. Maybe I'll just make it fling over to the side a little bit more. And now what you can do is you can simply select the shell layer, duplicate it, drag it forward maybe 2 frames, duplicate another one, drag it 2 frames forward, duplicate 2 frames forward. So you're now having kind of a whole chain of shells being ejected from the side of the gun. Obviously, to avoid these shell casings looking and moving exactly the same way, you probably want to go through these layers and kind of tweak the start and end position keyframes and maybe the motion path of these shell casings a little bit, just so that there's a little bit of variety and looks a little bit more natural. So yep, that's not too bad. Let's rewind and play this back. Cool, that's actually not too bad. Now the animations are a little bit off, I have to say, and we can keep tweaking this. But again, let's keep this tutorial as short as we can. Let's reselect all layers and press U to collapse them. And now let's add some bullet hits into the scene. I know technically nobody's shooting anything but bewildered stares back at Walter, but if this was a shootout, you would probably want to have some destruction elements in the scene, so let me show you how to add those. First off, it is important to note that this is a handheld shot, and so we will actually have to track this scene. Technically, for this particular shot, you may get away with 2D tracking, but the elements may still drift off a little bit, so let's just do this the correct way. Let's select the No Serial for Walter layer, and let's apply the 3D camera tracker from After Effects to that layer. The 3D camera tracker is only available in After Effects CS6 and above, so if you don't have this tracker, you have to do some sneaky 2D tracking to keep all of the bullet hit elements in place, or use a third-party plugin. Cool, tracking is completed. Let's just check this out and see how accurate this is, given that we haven't done any prep or cleanup. And that is actually not too bad. The average error for the track is just over a pixel, which is a bit borderline, but again, to not drag this tutorial on forever, let's just go with it and add the bullet hit elements. Let's return to the project and let me expand the bullet hits. And yes, bullet hits is a paid collection, and I have a few select elements right here. Now what I want to do is I want to add a bullet hit onto the wall up here behind Walter and another bullet hit down on the ground. Let's add the one on the wall first, and that's much easier. So let's select 4 points on this wall. Yeah, I think these 4 should do. Let's select these 4 points, right click onto the bullseye and select Create Solid and Camera. Let's unselect our layer and just scrub through, make sure that that plane is tracked properly in. Yep, and that actually looks pretty good. Let's first rename the solid to Wall Hit. And now make sure this layer is selected. Go into the bullet hits and select the element that you want to replace it with. Hold down the Alt key and then drag the element from your project panel down directly onto the selected layer. Let go, and After Effects will replace only the contents of this layer with the element from your project panel. All of the properties, including rotation, position, and everything else, will stay intact. Right now, however, all we see is this weird dirt element, and the reason we are is because it's way too big. So let's just scale this down. And you can see that this wall hit is actually properly tracked into the 3D space of our scene. Let me just drag this element forward a little bit so the wall hit doesn't start until a few seconds in. Yep, about here seems right. And now, well, you may have noticed that the bullet hit is actually on a solid black background and it's not pre-keyed, and I have a separate tutorial on my channel already for some of the options that you have for removing black backdrops from stock footage elements, but I'm not going to go into that for now. I'm just going to go the really simple way for this tutorial. So let's simply change the blend mode of the wall hit layer over to screen, rewind a little bit and play this back. Cool, that looks pretty good. Do note that all of the clips from the bullet hits collection are actually shot at 60 frames per second. If you do want them to play back in real time, you'll have to apply a time stretch or a time remapping effect. But for now, let's instead focus on compositing this a little bit better into the shot, because I think it's a little bit too bright. So let's select the wall hit, apply a curves effect, and let's just bring down the brightness a little bit to match the wall a little bit better. Cool, that looks good. I'm quite happy with that. Let's add the ground hit. For that, let's reselect our No Serial for Walter layer and reselect the 3D camera tracker. This will again display all of the track points for the 3D camera tracker. Now, I don't think I'll find a plane for the floor just because the carpet didn't have much detail to track, so we don't have any track points for the ground itself. But I think I can just define a plane right here on the front of the shelf and just bring it forward a little bit to position the ground head right here on the edge of the shelf. So let's just find 4 points that kind of define the plane of this shelf. So let's select them, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right click and select Create Solid. Let's rename the solid to Ground Hit. Return to our project panel and let's select a ground hit element. And same thing, make sure the ground hit layer is selected. Select the element from your project panel. Hold down Alt and then drag the element from your project panel down onto your layer and let go to replace it. And obviously the timing is off, so let's drag this layer forward a little bit. And as before, it's humongous, so let's scale this layer down. I'm also going to reposition this layer just a little bit so it's in front of the shelf and the layer leans backwards a little bit. So I'm going to kind of bring this back around. Let's rewind and play this back. Cool, I think that tracks in quite nicely. And again, let's go the cheap route to get rid of the black background and just change the blend mode over to screen. And rewind and play this back. Cool, as before with the wall hit, we can actually just apply a curves effect and just bring down the brightness a little bit more so it's not quite so in our face. And I think that actually looks really nice. Now that we've tracked the bullet hits into our shot, let's add some bullet holes so that there's some permanent damage being left on the wall and on the ground. For that, let's return to our project panel, and in my Gun Effects folder I have the bullet hole textures, which is the free collection. And again, I've just got 2 images here. There's I think about 150 odd to select from. So I've got a pistol drywall entry and a pistol wood entry. We're going to use the wood on the floor and the drywall obviously, well, on the drywall. So let's rewind a little bit to see where that drywall hit starts, which is this wall hit here. Let's again select all layers and collapse them by pressing U so it's a little bit easier to see. Make sure they're all collapsed, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate my wall hit because again the bullet hole will have to be tracked at the exact same location. So let's duplicate that, drag it below the wall hit, and let's rename this one to wall hole. And again, let's replace this with our pistol drywall entry. So Alt, drag the pistol drywall entry onto the selected wall hole layer. Let's zoom in a little bit to see how that looks and how big it is. Looks a bit odd, and that is because our wall hole is still set to screen mode. So let's change the mode back over to normal. So there's our bullet hole. It doesn't actually look too bad. I might actually bring up the brightness just a little bit more again. And the bullet hole is not quite positioned where the hit is happening. So let's drag this up and make sure it's positioned exactly where the bullet hit strikes the wall. So right here. And let's also trim the layer so the bullet hole is timed to appear together with the bullet hit element, so that the bullet hole appears just as the hit comes in. So let's rewind and play this back. Cool, that actually looks pretty good. Let's zoom back out and let's repeat the same for the ground impact. So let's zoom in on our ground impact. Select the ground hit layer, duplicate it with Ctrl D, drag this copy below the ground hit, and let's rename this to ground hole. And this time let's make sure we change the mode from screen over to normal. Come back into our project, and this time we're going to select the pistol wood exit layer. And again, let's click Alt and drag this onto our ground hole layer to replace it. And let's reposition this down at the bottom of where the impact is happening. And I think I'm actually going to make this even smaller and just try to position this right on the carpet. And looking at this, obviously this is way too bright. So let's reduce the brightness by quite a bit so it looks a little bit more like damage to the carpet. Again, it's not yet perfect, so feel free to spend some more time making sure that this is composited really well into your shot. Let's zoom back out, and we're almost done. The last thing after compositing all of the muzzle flash, shell and destruction elements into your shot is to add the audio. Personally, I wouldn't recommend using Adobe After Effects for audio work. I just think it's the wrong tool for the job. I myself do most of my audio in Steinberg Cubase, but you can also use Adobe Audition, which is another great tool that I'm yet to make some tutorials for, or you can even use Adobe Premiere. However, to keep this tutorial short, let's add the audio in Adobe After Effects. So let's return to our project panel, and in the Gun Effects series you have the free bullet hit sound effects collection. In here, I just have 2 of the many files that are part of this collection. So I have 2 wall hit sounds here, one we can use for the wall hit and one for the ground hit. So let's drag wall hit 3 into our composition. And if you expand this, and if you expand audio and then waveform, you can actually see the waveform of this audio. Let's shrink this down a little bit. And you can actually use this waveform to align the audio with your visuals. So right here, this one is our wall hit. So right here is when the wall gets shot. And that's exactly when I want the wall hit to kick in. So let's drag this forward until the audio aligns. And this is when the wall hit happens. And let's add wall hit number 5. And again, let's expand this audio and the waveform. And this is where the ground hit happens, right here. This is the ground hit layer. So let's drag this forward until the ground hit is right there. Let's collapse those 2 again. And finally, let's add an audio file for the automatic gunfire. Now, this you won't find in the bullet hit sound effects. You will have to go to the gun sound effects, which is one of the paid collections. And again, in here, I just have some samples. There's obviously much more in this collection. So let's select M60 light machine gun fire and drag this into our composition. This is a bit of a longer audio file. So let's check out the waveform. So there's a whole bunch of automatic fire happening here. And what I want to do is I want to find the point where Walter starts shooting, which is here. And again, let's align this so that he starts shooting right there. This automatic fire sound effect is actually quite a bit too long to match how long Walter is actually shooting his gun. And this is where you then have to animate the audio volume or kind of mesh the audio and the visuals together a bit better, which I wouldn't recommend doing in After Effects. But for the sake of getting this tutorial to a close, let's just collapse the layer and rewind to the very beginning. If you can't hear the audio by default when previewing in Adobe After Effects, you likely have a version of After Effects prior to CC 2015 release 15.3, and so audio is not played back as part of the normal preview. And so you will have to preview your composition using RAM Preview. But for me, being on CC 2017, I can simply preview my sequence and I will also hear the sound. So let's make the preview window a little bit bigger. Now keep in mind that the audio is not going to be perfectly aligned with the visuals. For that we would have to do a little bit of extra work, preferably outside of Adobe After Effects. But I really just wanted to take you through all of the awesome content included in the new Gun Effects series and show you how you can use these elements to create a really cool shootout scene. So now let's finally watch Walter go postal. And that's all I have for you today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, if you do have any comments, questions or suggestions, just leave them down in the section below. If you did enjoy this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up, favorite it and share it with the world. And don't forget to subscribe if you do want to see more cool filmmaking and visual effects tutorials. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.